So to open our webinar today, I will like to invite the IOAPA president here. He's the president, the newly elected president, 2025 to 2027, and an active driver of the Olympic movement.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. We have 5 different continents represented today. And as president of the International Olympic Academy Participant Association, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to this important webinar organized in partnership with IOAPA and IGNITX. The alumni of the International Olympic Academy serve as an ambassador of Olympic, Paralympic values, promoting education, cultural exchange, and ethical leadership in sport, fosters dialogue and collaboration across culture to advance the Olympic movement. IGNITX is an international team of passionate game experts providing specialized consultancy services in combination with active and integrated support of project delivery. IGNITX works with 2 main focus streams, event management and safeguarding in sport. For both of these streams, they deliver consultancy, operation, and educational services, including turnkey solutions. We are very excited for this partnership, as IGNITX can bring expert knowledge and support to IOAPA's vision and mission. Today, we gather under the theme Safeguarding in Sport, a theme that resonates deeply with all of us who believe that sport must remain a safe, inclusive, and accountable space for every individual. Whether athletes, coach, official, or volunteer, everyone deserves protection, respect, and dignity within the sporting community. The Olympic and Paralympic values remind us that excellence, friendship, respect, and equality can only thrive when the foundation of safeguarding is solid. This webinar offers us the chance not only to learn, but also to reflect on how we as a global community can reinforce that foundation together. Thank you all for joining us. Let us open our heart, our mind, and our collective energy to make sport safer for all.
Thank you very much, Xavier. I'm very proud to say that I'm also a friend of Xavier from the IOA 2014. And this is how sport brings us all together. Yeah, and that's why we're here today as well. For this webinar in Safeguarding in Sport, we have 3 very, very well-experienced and great speakers that we have lined up for you today. The first one would be Daniela Negreda. The second speaker that we have is Andreja McQuarrie. And finally, Michael Kwiatkowski. I hope I don't pronounce it wrongly. We shall start with our first speaker, Daniela. Daniela Negreda is a senior leader with nearly 30 years of experience, who is now specializes in developing and embedding people-centered safeguarding system across the sports. Her Safe Sport credentials include leading the safeguarding focus stream at IGNITX, where she designs scalable solutions like an anonymous integrity reporting mechanism, an e-learning platform, and a sport-specific certification system, which is currently in development. Daniela also contributed to the training initiatives for system currently for the Paris 2024 Olympic Games, and led the research for the EU-funded Building European Safe Sports Together, BESST project, co-developing the legal and operational safeguarding framework. Her strategy and communication expertise gained from senior roles at the International Olympic Committee and corporate leadership ensures that her systems are compliant, effective, and culturally relevant. This short bio of Daniela doesn't do her justice for her extensive background, but I would like to proudly invite Daniela as our first speaker. Daniela, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Tania. Yeah, I think you did justice. Don't worry. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I know people are all around the world. It's so great to see all of you here. So we have about 50 minutes together. And what I would like to do today is really to exchange some of the experiences and insights that we've had in the past few years. We will talk about it, how new it is. So we are not talking about more than 4 or 5 years that people are involved in safeguarding, but also learn kind of proven approaches on how we can create safe, supportive environments for the sport industry. I know a lot of people here is experienced. I saw some of the names. So I hope that Andre, Borut, Nikki, Andrea, you guys that are experienced can also contribute. As Tania said, please send questions, comments on the chat just because of the number of people, and we will make sure to address them at the end of the presentation. But please don't be shy. For everybody else that doesn't know what it is, we will try to have an interactive session, especially at the beginning, so we can bring everybody to the same level before we start talking about more on how we can all contribute for safeguarding. Okay, so please don't be shy. We'll have some tools here to assist us in the presentation. So starting, what is safeguarding in sport? And I believe that some of you have full knowledge of what it is. Some might not. So what I will ask is go to your chat, and in the chat, please write down 1 or 2 words of what you believe safeguarding in sport is. So everybody has the word safe protection in mind. So that's good, but let's go a little bit deeper, okay? And to really say what safeguarding is, I want to try to demystify it a little bit. So again, looking for everybody's participation here, we are going to play a little game. And as we get along on the game, I will be explaining the concepts, okay? So I'm going to put a statement on the screen. I'm going to read it, and Iman will put a poll in the screen. Please, once you hear the statement, let us know if you believe that that's a myth or a fact. Okay? So let's start with our first statement. And harmful behavior happens in every sport. So you are going to be prompt here with the poll. And if you believe that it is a myth, click on myth. If you believe that it's a fact, click on fact. And responses are coming in really quickly. Thanks everybody for participating. And I can see that about 75% of the people participating here believe that that's a fact. And we still have answers coming in, and we are in about 25% on myth. So if we close the poll, we can see the harmful behavior happens in every sport, and this is actually a fact. So when we start talking about harmful behavior, we are actually talking that every sport has this type of behavior happening, sometimes behind the scenes. Okay? Let's go to the next statement. Transgressive behavior is only about sexual abuse. Again, please answer if you believe that it's a myth or a fact. Let's see. Answer coming in here again very fast. Thanks everybody for participating. This is great. So the statement of transgressive behavior is only about sexual abuse gets 85% of people saying that it's a myth. If we end the poll here and we look and we see that it's a myth. So what we are talking about is that when we are dealing with safeguarding, when we are dealing with transgressive behavior, there is a much broader spectrum of behaviors happening. We have sexual transgression, absolutely, but we also have psychological and physical transgressions. All of those are considered transgressive behaviors. This might include harassment, abuse, as you know, the first 2 things that come to mind, but also neglect, exploitation, defamation, discrimination, bullying, All of those things are part of this much broader spectrum that we have on transgressive behavior. So it's not only about sexual abuse or sexual harassment. This is a very important concept for us to talk about when we are getting into this world of safeguarding. Let's go to the next one. Safe sport is only relevant for sports perceived as physically risky. Again, do you believe that this is a myth or a fact? So we are getting answers here, and we are getting, for now, 100% of the answers saying that it is a myth. So let's end our poll here and verify. Safe sport is only relevant for sports perceived as physically risky, and it's a myth. So we mentioned on the first statement that it happens in every single one of sports. And a lot of times people think of safe sport as the physical safety of an athlete when practicing a sport. But as you start seeing, on the broader spectrum of transgressive behavior, we understand that it's not just the physical risk of the practice of sport, but actually we are talking about everything that has to do with the behavior within the practice of a sport. One more. Harmful behavior impacts both males and females. Do you believe that to be a myth or a fact? So again, lots of answers coming in here. Give another second to see the answers. And we have about 95% of the people saying that this is a fact and 5% saying that this is a myth. If we end the poll here, we can look that harmful behavior impacts both males and females is actually a fact. It's a quite interesting, actually, when we dig into studies, we can see that male athletes sometimes experience even higher rates, of certain forms of abuse, including sexual abuse. This is something that we have to demystify, because there is still a perception that safeguarding is about sexual abuse and that sexual abuse is only impacting females. And we can see through studies that no, safeguarding is much broader than just the sexual abuse aspect, and also it impacts both male and females. So it's something for us to start to change our mindset on how we actually talk and experience safeguarding. Another one, quite interesting one, coaches are the primary perpetrators. So do you believe that coaches are the primary perpetrators? Please click on fact. If you believe that coaches are not the primary perpetrators or the only perpetrators, please click on fact. And we are seeing people voting here. Quite interesting. This one is changing a lot according to the votes. Okay. Very interesting how this is going, from one way to the other, growing and diminishing. But we have that about 75% of people here believe this to be a myth, and about 25% saying that it's a fact. So let's end the poll and verify. So the statement was, coaches are the primary perpetrator when we talk about transgressive behaviors, and it's a myth. We actually have studies that show that abuse is more often inflicted by peers than coaches. About 45% of sexual violence, in organized sport comes from peer athletes. This really starts to shift a lot everything that you might have in your mind, right? So we already talked about being in every single sport. We talk about impacting both male and females. We talk about being much more than sexual violence. And now we are also talking that it's not the hierarchical, behavior, let's put it this way, structure that it's causing a transgressive behavior, but actually that this can be even peer-to-peer. It can even be from a peer all the way up, for instance, to a coach. And I like to give some examples when we are talking about this part here, because it starts to make a picture of what we are talking on the safeguarding and some examples. So yes, you can have the bullying, right, which would be normally peer-to-peer in most cases, right? But also it can be, for instance, a group of athletes that are, for instance, economically more affluent, discriminating or bullying assistant coach, for instance, that comes from a less privileged background, for instance. So we really start to understand that transgressive behavior can be acted by all the different participants in sport. Another one, all transgressive behaviors are as severe and deserving of concern. So do you believe that no matter what transgressive behavior we are talking about, being it, as we said, a bullying, being it sexual abuse, that all of them deserve the same attention and concern? And this is also another one that people are going from one direction to the other. Quite interesting to see the participation here and the opinions. So do you believe that all transgressive behaviors are as severe and deserving of concern? Do you believe it to be a myth or a fact? So I got the answers here, and we have about 83% of people saying that this is a fact. Let's end the poll and come here and check that this actually is a fact. When we talk about the transgressive behavior, we saw the broader spectrum with the sexual, the psychological, and the physical one. And we believe that for safeguarding, every single concern should be treated equally, because we want to stop all those behaviors that actually impact the people. Because this is what happened. It might be small for somebody, but it can be very big from somebody else. And this, how people will react to experiencing a transgressive behavior, might prevent them from the practice of sport, might, make them not want to go to their practice. Probably can give up, they can decide to change clubs, all of those things that will really tarnish the ideal of the practice of sport that we all here love so much and want to make sure that everybody has access to it. So yes, it's deserving of everybody's attention. This next statement is a quite interesting one, and I know that as we go along, we can have debates about it, but some transgressive behavior is acceptable if it leads to victory. What do you believe? Do you believe that it's justifiable or not? Do you believe that it's a myth or a fact? So some transgressive behavior is acceptable if it leads to victory. Just waiting some more responses here. And we are seeing that 95% of the people believe this to be a myth. And it is a myth. There is no justification for transgressive behavior. This is very important to highlight. Transgressive behavior is unexcusable. If it leads to victory, if it doesn't lead to victory, it's not a medal that it counts. I think we all are here for the beauty of the sport, for the purity of it. So no matter what, it should not be justifiable. So if it leads to victory, it's not an excuse to have a transgressive behavior. Another quite interesting statement. If we don't see it, it's still happening. What do you believe? Do you believe this to be a myth or a fact. If we don't see it, transgressive behavior is still happening in the world of sport. And this has been 100% answered as a fact. Let's check this out. And exactly, it's still happening, especially when you start to understand, from the other statements that we discussed, that it's much bigger than just the sexual abuse of females by coaches, right? So it is happening. And we have from the BESST project, the Building European Safe Sport Together project, this chart put together that there is what it's called a salient bias phenomenon, right? Which means that only those cases that are very prominent, normally the mediatic ones, such as sexual abuse cases, that are so obvious, those are the ones that are talked about. And this is the perception that we see, right? Because everybody is seeing and talking about. But we don't see what is below, the iceberg. And we know how dangerous the under the water part of the iceberg is, right? There are so many characteristics in here. And through research, there is a big misconception. We hear people saying, oh yeah, what's not seen does not exist or does not matter. If cases are not reported, it's because it's not happening. We heard a lot of people saying, in my country, this it doesn't happen. We don't have people behaving this way. We also hear people saying that about their sports. Oh, our sport, we are like a little family. So transgressive behavior doesn't happen. Forgetting that actually is, especially case of sexual abuse in minors in general, the research shows that most of the cases are committed by a close family member. So hearing that from sport administrators that in our little family, transgressive behavior doesn't happening, it's really, a call for concern. Because we are seeing that transgressive behavior is much, much bigger than the sexual abuse, right? As we said, there is the psychological impact, there is the physical one for sure, and there's the sexual one as well. And when we bring these three spheres of transgressive behavior, we can notice that really there are a lot of cases that are not being reported. It might be because people are afraid. It might be because people don't have a channel to do so, but we do have the understanding that it's happening. And this is the reason why we are all here. This is the reason why we have so many people joining us today for this webinar, because we have to talk about it. We have to have the understanding of what transgressive behavior is, and the understanding also that we need to take action. I have one last statement here for us to talk about, and it's about a universal understanding and terminology is possible. Think about your own language and think about safeguarding. Do you believe that a universal understanding and terminology is possible? Do you believe this to be a myth or a fact? I'll give you a second to think about this. So we have here about 80% of people believing this to be a fact. And I'll tell you, we believe this to be a fact. But for that, we have to work together. And why is that? When we think about it, there is a lot of different ways of saying the same thing. And more than that, there is languages that come into play. So we know that safeguarding is a word that it's not easily translated in all languages. So what we have to do is to move away from the concept of safeguarding as a word and work together towards terminology, towards a definition. Here is a simple definition of transgressive behavior, because transgressive behavior is much easier to understand in all the languages than safeguarding. It is translatable, right? And when we start to talk about definition in the broad spectrum that it brings us, it's much easier for us to understand each other. So we are talking about any form of a misuse of relationship of power that violates someone's access to safe sport. Let me break this down a little bit, right? Because we just talked about coaches not being the primary perpetrators, right? And then suddenly I put here a misuse of relationship of power. Yes, because we talk about this transgressive behavior happening when somebody actually uses any form of power over somebody else. So this can be hierarchical. Absolutely. We have coaches that, commit transgressive behavior because of the positions that they are. But we also talked about the example of peer-to-peer. And what happened there is that there is some form of power that builds up, and that is what leads to the transgressive behavior. So the example of bullying, sometimes it is somebody that is stronger, right? And misuse this power of being stronger to, for example, hit another athlete that is weaker. I gave the other example where athletes from a more affluent economical situation can be, harassing, for instance, an assistant coach that, comes from a different background. There is this relationship of power in here, and you can see that it's not hierarchical. So it's any form that misuse this power. And we also have to think of the whole sexual, psychological, and physical transgression in here. Just last week, I was actually talking to a colleague of mine, and she mentioned that during her training, the coach used as a penalty, in a way, for the athletes to prohibit athletes to drink water. And when you think about it, that's really a physical transgression, right? You are really blocking somebody access to basic needs. And, we were talking about it, and I just thought about my career as an athlete in volleyball, which I experienced the same thing, maybe in a slightly different way, where, my coach would tell us, we were 12 in a team, right, that we had a minute to drink water. And this was about 40 years ago. So we had 2 water fountains. There were no beautiful water bottles, as we have today, everybody with their water bottles. So we had to run to the water fountain, drink water, and be back in less than a minute. And if we didn't that, then there were, a physical punishment, right? So push-ups, abdominal, or we had to sit out of some activity, which is called a punishment. And when you think about it, the impact that those things have in people, in athletes, that can be quite big, right? But we don't go just into talking on the practice of sport. We have to remember, as majority of us here, we are all into the administration of sport. We are all sport managers. And transgressive behavior also happens in the workplace. It might take the form, that we are used in an office, but it also might take a form in an event, where some of the services might not be provided up to what you expected. And you take that, for instance, on a volunteer. So we have to think very broadly. We need to understand that transgressive behavior is happening in all sports, in all sports organization. And it can take the form of sexual transgression, psychological transgression, or physical transgression. It also talks about everyone, because access to safe sport is also access to an office that is safe. And before I move to the next slide, I also want to remind everybody that this is not just in-person contact. We also have to consider the online environment that we live in. We are talking about meetings that are happening online. It's just because we are not in person there. It doesn't mean that maybe some psychological transgression is not happening. We have to consider, private text messages, emails. And another big one is actually social media, right? So all of those have to be considered when we are talking about transgressive behavior in sport, when we are talking about upholding safeguarding. So I know I talked a lot because I wanted to bring everybody up to the point that we are here, where we can start talking about why does it matter for you? And very briefly, what is the current situation of sports organizations? First of all, it's still in its infancy stage. We did research and we realized that there is in Europe about 30 to 40% of organizations that have reporting mechanisms in place. And for those, only 10% have a follow through. Okay, so it means that you can report, but not all organizations know what to do with a report. We are still struggling with funds. There is so much that it's needed to do in sports organizations. We all know that very well. And sometimes safeguarding is forgotten, right? So we are here also to think about how can we together assist it, right? How can we think about putting it into our budget plans? How can we find ways of requesting funds from governing bodies to ensure that safeguarding in sports is properly implemented? Diversity of framework. This is, together with terminology, another big situation that we have currently in the sport world for safeguarding. Let's think about a policy that it's common to everyone. Let's make a parallel here with doping, right? So doping has one framework that is valid for every single country, every single sport. And for safeguarding, we are still not there. So you have different terminologies, you have different approaches, different legal documentations, and different laws in each country, which actually make the whole implementation a little bit harder. But we can overcome it. I've mentioned briefly about online behavior in the previous slide, and here is to talk about it properly. Online behavior is becoming a big issue, especially for elite athletes because of betting sites. So we've been noticing an increase in transgressive behavior happening online because of people betting, right? And the athletes being targeted because of it. Also, there is the anonymity, and I'm doing air quotes here, of the online sphere, right? So people just think that because you are behind, a computer screen, you can go there and say whatever you want. And a lot of transgressive behavior is happening online, and we need to ensure that we can protect people. There is a company in the UK specialized on online transgressive behavior protection, online safeguarding, highly recommended for those on elite level to implement, but we also have to figure out proper channels to do it at all levels of sport. And a final one here on the current situation is unclear roles and responsibilities. So first, we have a really positive aspect of here, which is an increased presence of what we call a safeguarding officer or well-being officer or a guardian, as some sports call it. So this is great. We are seeing an increase. We are seeing also an increase on number of courses being offered. However, there's still lack of clarity of roles and responsibilities. What are these people supposed to do? And are they supposed to intervene with situations? Are they supposed to actually report? So a better structure in place is required.
I am Nicolette Schipper van Veldhoven. I'm a professor at Windesheim University and the University of Twente in the Netherlands, and my research focus is on sport pedagogy as well as on sport risks and safety. Research shows that 75% of children in organized sports experience some form of transgressive behavior. 2/3 encounter psychological transgressive behavior, and 1 out of 5 faces sexual transgressive behavior. And certain groups, such as elite and handicapped athletes, are more at risk. Perpetrators may include teammates, coaches, physiotherapists, doctors, or even spectators. So it is a big problem within organized sport. Despite decades of policy efforts to reduce transgressive behavior in sports, the rates remain high. Addressing these issues is complex as they are influenced by cultural norms, social standards, and beliefs affecting all layers of the sports system. So a cultural change is needed. A cultural shift is essential. Leadership is needed in policy making, macro level, within sports clubs, meso level, and especially among coaches, micro level. Every stakeholder in organized sport has a responsibility to ensure a safe sports environment. To make sports a positive, growth-oriented experience that enhances performance, a safe sports environment is essential. So we need a rethinking of the system, that it happens in the whole of society, and we need it for the whole of society to rethink what we think is normal behavior. Famous football player within the Netherlands, Cruyff, and he had also had famous arguments. And he said, you only get to see it when you want to see it. If you go look for the things you want to see, you will see them. So persons who don't want to see that it's also happening in the sport, it's also happening in the sport clubs, will not look. They don't want to address the behavior. I'm a behavior scientist. I cannot change your behavior. You have to do that yourself. We can only guide you the way, but then you have to make that step yourself. And the realization that safe sport is essential to get performance, essential to develop children, essential to get positive experience, essential not to drop out from sport for children, essential to be a healthy environment, that's the key. If they don't see the key, I can show them the door, I can give them the key, but they have to open the door itself with the key. And if they don't want to, what do? We have a lot of knowledge. We have a lot of materials. We can show them the way. And the most frustrating thing for our scientists is that we have all those knowledge, but that they don't use it. So keep using the knowledge we send you.
So I hope that everybody is here because we are giving you the key, and we hope that you will open that door. And as Nicolette's saying and I was explaining so far, a call for cultural change in sport is needed. We need to have a collected commitment. We need to understand that there are new standards. We need to empower people to understand what transgressive behavior is and be able to address power imbalances. And all of that is a shared responsibility. And Dr. Nicolette also mentioned that it is a multi-level challenge. It's the entire sport community that needs to come together. It's every single one of us here, together with your organizations, that have to work together. We have to go all the way from the macro level to the micro level. We cannot leave anybody behind, and it's not going to be an easy fix. It's going to be years and years of work, but we have to do it as a community. One person alone, it's not going to be able to do it. But if each of us are the little pebble thrown into the middle of a still lake, we are able to create a ripple effect. And this is really why we are here today, to call everybody from the community to engage in the conversation, to engage into bringing this topic to light. Now, I said, it's not going to be an easy path. And I have still about 10 minutes, and I want to now just briefly talk about what should organizations be doing. As I said, it's not a simple path, but it can be done, okay? Especially if the community is together in it. So I will briefly talk about the different steps, okay, that it's required. First thing you need an organization structure. That means that you need to have somebody that knows about safeguarding, somebody that champions it, you know? It can be a certified person. There are courses today that the IOC offers, such as the safeguarding officer. There are courses offered by FIFA, by UEFA. You have the FIFA well-being officers, and I might be saying it wrong, so I apologize, and UEFA guardians. You might have somebody that doesn't have a certification, but it's knowledgeable about safeguarding. You might have a lawyer that will sponsor it. You might have a psychologist. You might have an athlete, right, that might have experienced some sort of it. The important thing is that you need to have a structure, right? The organization needs to recognize and insert that responsibility within the organization. And with that comes a legal framework. And to have a robust legal framework, a lot of things are required. You need to have reporting mechanism, but it shouldn't stop there, right? You need to be able to manage those cases, meaning investigation, adjudication, appeal, sanction. You have to have protection to whistleblower, to witnesses, to victim retaliation. You need to ensure data protection and confidentiality. We need to be able to take action, very quickly with provisional measures. So the legal framework, to be robust, you need to take care of a couple of things, knowing that it's not just writing something. You need to have behind the scenes actions and people knowing what is their responsibilities as well. We need to be able to take that to people, meaning you have a legal framework. People need to know about the legal framework, right? Everybody in the sport community should be aware of safeguarding, should know what safeguarding is, should understand what is and isn't a transgressive behavior, right? Be given examples and be able to identify, right? Oh, this is a transgressive behavior. This is not a transgressive behavior. So training and awareness campaign are crucial for the progress of safe sport environment. On the step 3, you have to think of how you are not only protecting your group, so looking into hiring processes, but also looking into those that are within your community. So for instance, members associations processes. An example here is that you are a governing body, which means that you have other organizations under you. What is in your legal framework that actually is pertaining to your member association process? And how are you helping them? How can you work together? And also, don't forget those that come to service you. So contractors also have to be taken into consideration because in a way, they are part of your community. So you cannot forget them. And step 4, implement. So once you have all of the steps thought through, you need to ensure that this is put into action, it's implemented, and that you actually are thinking on maintaining it. So it's not just, okay, let's do a documentation, check the box, we have now safeguarding. No, you have to continue step by step. You need to understand what happened once you have, for instance, an email for people to report. If somebody reports, what do? You need to have all of that in place, right? What happens if it is a service provider, right, that comes in here and commits a transgressive behavior? How can you protect your group of people, right? And once you implement, it's not simply, okay, it's done. Okay, great deal. Now I cross my arms and hope for the best. No, you have to ensure that there is a maintenance. There is a maintenance on your policies. There is a maintenance on your training. There is a maintenance on your awareness campaign. We know that when organizations first start talking about safeguarding, when first implement steps of safeguarding, cases start to pop up. And this scaries, it can be scary, right? And people are just like, oh my God, I can't deal with it. But we also know that these cases will diminish with time because things are happening because people were not aware that what they were doing was wrong. A lot of the cases is just a lack of judgment, right? Lack of common sense in many, many cases. But if you can talk through it, if you can make perceive, you will see the cases going down exponentially up to a point that only those that are really perpetrators, that we know that, it's in their nature, and you will be able to identify those very quickly and eliminate them from the environment. So you create a safer environment to everyone. I try to give an overview just to bring a sense of safeguarding in sport and really try to make everybody understand that this is a community commitment. Every single one of you in here should really take this information that I pass on and look into how can we implement in our organization, or if we already have something in our organization, are we ticking all the boxes, or are we just here talking about it in general terms just to say we have something? Also, examine your experience. Look into, I know everybody here has been or still is an athlete. Have you experienced something? Have you committed a transgressive behavior? Because this is also a moment of reflection. And as I said, a lot of the transgressive behaviors that we see out there is for lack of awareness, is for lack of common sense or, judgment. And these are the ones that we really want to eliminate. So when we have that big case is the one that we will focus and ensure quickly elimination of the problem. I thank everybody for being here. I pass it back to Tania.
Thank you very much, Daniela, for this very interactive session for all of us. I really like how we did the myth and fact. It's anonymous, so we don't know who got it wrong or right, but it's really a great learning session. And I know that today's session is just the tip of the iceberg, of course, but definitely a very eye-opening one for me. Today's session, thank you very much, Daniela. And as a reminder, we will be taking questions only after the end of all three speakers have shared their session. So if anyone have any questions, please feel free to put in the chat. And if you're too shy to share the question, you can send them, I think, privately to Daniela or me or Linyote or even Raja here, just letting you know. Now that we have gained a little bit more knowledge about what safeguarding transgression is, let me bring you everyone here to hear and learn from another expert with experience. Let's welcome Andreja McQuarrie. All right, let me introduce Andreja. Andreja is a former Olympian and a world professional champion in alpine skiing, whose athletic career at the 1984 Winter Olympics, instilled a lifelong commitment to integrity and athlete-centered value. And Andrea, she transitioned from being an athlete, a professional athlete, to the International Sports Administration, and she managed major events like the Pan American Games, as well as authored several IOC guides on athletes' experience. And in the recent years, Andrea has become a leader in safeguarding. She was also a key contributor to building European Safe Sport Together, the BEST project, where she actively disseminated best practices through presenting and moderating forums across Europe. She is currently a member of BEST 2.0, focusing on integrating new technologies into safeguarding training to modernize and embed prevention strategies in sports governance. This is very impressive background. So let's welcome Andrea. And this session is going to be a sharing session. Yeah, and I really look forward to hearing from you, Andrea. I will kickstart, and I really would like to know more. Right, Andrea, for you as an elite athlete and Olympian, looking back, what was the environment like for you in terms of safeguarding while you are a professional athlete? I know it's been a while, but you can try to recall.
It has been a while. Greetings to everyone. Yes, if you don't mind, we'll go back into the 90s just to put things in perspective. This is when I was on the national alpine ski team at the time. It was Yugoslavia. And just to paint the environment at that time, the athletes had very little rights. I'm sure it was different in different countries. From my experience right now, or from the information I have, some things have changed tremendously, but some still remain. And just to paint a little bit of a picture, we had very little rights. For example, I was qualified for the 1980 Olympic Games in Lake Placid already, but some politicians decided that I'm too young and that I'll still have many chances to go later. And then I didn't have a chance to turn to anybody, not even for that. I'm not considered that safeguarding, but just to paint a picture of the athletes' rights, because I really think that we were mainly considered as the tools to reach the results. So that was the mentality, the mindset, definitely at that time.
Most important too.
Absolutely, yes. So there was I also wanted to say that I had the same experience as Daniela mentioned earlier. When I was training athletics, we didn't get any drinks basically. So if we wanted to go drink water, we had to really truly skip outside quickly, and return back as quickly as possible so the coach wouldn't see us. And it just shows the mentality of that time. And there's one case that I wanted to share with you, just to also give a little bit of a perspective on what also now I realize, only now, decades later, I realize it was a case of safeguarding. For example, so what happened is in the 1985, I was with the national ski team we were traveling on the tour of the World Cup, which was in North America, so America and Canada. And I got, so what happened is I've always been a technical skier. We never trained downhill, which is the fast, straight down the hill skiing discipline for those that don't know alpine skiing. And we never trained that. However, for the whole team to be paid their stay for a week in Canada between the technical disciplines, competitions, a team had to have at least one athlete compete. So, of course, money was important more, apparently, than the athlete's well-being. So they decided that my teammate and I would be signed up for this competition in downhill skiing, and the rest of the team would train slalom, which was also my best discipline. And to shorten this, my teammate got hurt on the first day of training of downhill, but I made it through 2 days of training, preparation for the World Cup. And then on the World Cup, on the day of the race, I got injured, one of many athletes. And I'd like to say that no coach went with me to that competition, which was unheard of even then, and it still is. So I had no information that there was a danger section on the course and that 9 or 10 athletes have already been injured before me there. So I had no information, so I got also injured. This was a not only sport-altering injury, but also my life-altering injury because my knee was terribly injured. And to make things worse is they've sent my injured teammate and me back home on the airplane that had like 2 stopovers with all our equipment and gear to go back to Europe without any escort. Nobody went with us, and we were at that time, we were maybe like 17, 18, 19 years old. So really, I consider this, it had many wrong aspects at that time, but now I look at it, yes, it was neglect. It was really disregarding athlete welfare, and so on.
And now that you're transitioned from being an athlete, now you're working in this sport organization and event management. How do you feel it has evolved or changed compared to how it was approached back then?
Just to really touch also on what I raised before on the athletes' rights, which are also human rights and so on. In Slovenia, now we have, for many years, we have an athlete, a sport ombudsman. So there is somebody to turn to, but it's only one person for the whole country. So there's a lot to do, but there is progress. But looking at the sport events, like you said before, I have worked in Olympic Games organization for like 5 Winter Olympic Games, and then many other continental and World University Games and Pan Am Games and so on. Obviously, this I started long time ago, but the last Olympic Games I worked for was in Pyeongchang 2018, and there was no safeguarding plans in all those years, in all those major events. So the IOC has in the recent years made humongous, like huge progress, and is really leading the way in general for sport, for safeguarding, safe sport, but also for the event. So there's huge progress there. But that's on the level of the Olympic Games and the IOC. As a comparison, I would also like to give you that information that I was writing the games, let's say athletes experience guide for the IOC maybe about 8 years ago. There was no topic. I did not include a topic. Nobody else did on safeguarding. Then in 2023, 2024, I was part of the courses that the IOC and the Olympic Solidarity were delivering on all 5 continents, and we definitely included safeguarding at that point based on what the IOC had developed until that time. So this was the very first time that this topic for me was included. So this is only a few years ago. I'm not saying it was otherwise, I'm saying me, right? But I've also since 8 years ago, for 6 years, I have been a president of the women's football club in Slovenia on the first league, but it has all the age groups from under 9 until the seniors and so on. So it's a pretty good size club. And we had, like I'm saying, about 7 years ago, received a mandate from UEFA that all the clubs that wanted to be licensed, they had to have the safeguarding policy and a trust person appointed and so on. So I had interest in safeguarding since the first time I've heard about it. And I really took a lot of time to develop the policies with the guidelines that we received from UEFA. So this was very, very helpful. But still, we had no education, right? So, and we had a trust person, but there was no training for that person. There still isn't. And I just thought it would be perhaps interesting to say that in some recent work within trying to make safeguarding an important topic within sport, also on the national level, it's become quite interesting how it's unclear what is safeguarding, but also whose responsibility it is, right? Here it was our club doing it. I know that not every club was doing that. I was doing it because I was also interested in it. But when I recently was part of the group that was trying to put safeguarding into the national strategy for the next 10 years, for example, the response was that our country is a very safe country, which shows complete lack of understanding what we're even talking about, that basically it's the responsibility of every club, of every national federation, and so on. So really putting it on the others. So we still have a ways to go.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I do believe definitely there's a lot more to go. And I guess clubs or organization, they may not put in any safeguarding policies or strategies unless it's a mandate, like how it was a mandate by UEFA that you need to have a safeguarding policy. With your involvement in BESST, did it help with putting that strategy in Slovenia?
We have used the materials also in our countries of the partners. We have also distributed it widely to for example, European Olympic Academies and National Olympic Committees and so on. So it's still available online on site. There's tons of very useful information and materials there also for awareness and so on. But I can say we were not there yet. Obviously, we don't have safeguarding in the plan officially. I hope something will change. What we're leaning towards, or I'm leaning towards, is to have an independent organization or agency that could really also have ideally responsibility for education, for awareness, but also for adjudication. Like Daniela said before, there's certain parts about it, about safeguarding processes, but we need a whole full circle, right? You need awareness. People need to be able to recognize it, to actually admit it exists. That's a big one, because I still find out in some couple courses that I was involved in that people think it's an imaginary thing. They're surprised when we give them the numbers of people that are impacted. And I think, unfortunately, or fortunately, rather unfortunately, that in Slovenia, it took what we were fearing, that nothing will move until there's a big scandal. And it actually just happened in one of the sports, and it's all over the media. 6 athletes reported the coach. So it's a criminal investigation right now. I think it will bring forward to find out who's responsible for what. And on the other hand, it's unfortunate because it had sexual connotations. And I think it unfortunately leaves out all these other aspects of transgressive behavior, like we were mentioning. It's the whole culture change, how you treat somebody around you, whether it's a teammate, whether you have power over them or not, in one way or another. And I think it's really, there's a need for culture change, that people should make sure that everybody else is treated with respect. So this is part of this big job. I think the biggest job that we need to do is the awareness.
Sure, Andrea. I mean, with your multiple and numerous experience, vast experience, being in the Pan Am Games and many other multi-sport events, why do you think it's important to implement this measure? Also, because we're running out of time, maybe you can also share with us one great tip for those who would like to implement this. Where can they start? Where can they go? Is there anything resource that we could just look up to? What would be your best recommendation?
My best recommendation would be the project BEST, because I'm the nearest to it and I know it the best, like Building European Safe Sports Together, BESST. And online, there, like I said, there's tons of materials on there. But just to answer your question about the events, for example, we have been involved in the part of safeguarding, especially IGNITX was the safeguarding partner in Skopje, European Youth Olympic Festival, just this summer, and also was involved in doing in the safeguarding program for the winter edition in Bakuriani, Georgia, earlier this year. So these are a couple events that are really a good example where I think it's mandatory to have safeguarding structures in place. And why? Because first of all, these are young people. At the EYOF, the athletes are between 16 and 18 years old, 14 and 18 years old. It was interesting to also have discussions. Who is responsible? At what point is a parent responsible? At what point is the National Olympic Committee responsible? When is the organizing committee responsible? And so on. So IGNITX had prepared a really, really good structure and the system for the whole process from A to Z. But we've done, what's also important is this events, especially the events that are multi-sport event or international events, because you have athletes, officials, coaches from so many different, and organizers from so many different cultures come together. And sometimes it can be quite challenging. And I know we are out of time, but it just occurred. I just remembered one other case, for example, in Asia, when we had at the Olympic Games, in fact, right? So it was a worker who was European. I can say that was basically gave a hug to one of the local volunteers, and that was really not, he got reported. He meant well. These are all the little challenges that we face all the time. He got reported. So the police came there. He was taken by police and so on. So we had it was quite traumatic for everyone involved, So having this kind of, like I said, awareness, but then also procedures done correctly. So people don't get traumatized more than they need to. It's most of the time more about education. But to say, sorry,
Sure.
one last thing in this EYF
I like the
events,
example. I really like the example.
tremendously good awareness programs with the EOC Ambassadors program, where they did a lot of games, also like this myth and fact. And there's a lot of materials and little short videos and educational videos that also you can find on the Building European Safe Sport Together website. And they used them all, and they had the largest participation at any so far, basically.
Yeah, thank you very much, Andrea. I did actually went through before I knew about you, and because I wanted to put a safeguarding policy into my project in the IOC Young Leaders Program, and I really like the example of what you gave, the last example where a European guy, or maybe I don't know, some other countries, right, where they are more culturally open-minded physically, and I think it's also something to do with awareness, being more culturally aware when it relates to proper manner. Yeah, and thank you very much, Andrea. For any one of you, again, if you have any questions for Andrea, please feel free to put them in the chat. We will address them after the end of our session. Yeah, I really thank you, Andrea, for sharing your experience, your expertise as an athlete, an Olympian, and also, of course, a very important stakeholder in sport as well. And we hope that many of you can look into the BEST project, the BEST, for more safeguarding resources. We will now move on to our final speaker. His name is Michael Thomas Kwiatkowski. Michael is an Olympian and a graduate from the IOA International Olympic Academy Masters Program. He has held executive roles in national and provincial sports organization. And as a dedicated safe sport advocate, Michael's work centers around safeguarding athletes and to ensure that athletes have safe sport experience. And he achieved this by strengthening governance framework that emphasizes on integrity, transparency, and ethical practice across the globe. And today, Michael will take us into a very powerful real-world case study from Canada, where a national safe sport crisis revealed systemic abuse and governance failure. And through advocacy and the voices of the athletes, as well as some stakeholders, this crisis led to the establishment of a new Federal Sport Integrity Commission. So Mike's presentation will highlight how this turning point exposes a broken system, but it also created a pathway towards safety in Canadian sport. So Mike, the floor is yours. Looking forward to hear from you, your story.
All right. No, I'm really appreciative. Thank you very much. And I'm very grateful to IGNITE because a lot of the work over the years has really been influenced by IGNITE. So I'm also very appreciative there. I'll dive right into my presentation here is Safeguarding in Sport, Canada's Collapse and the Global Warning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Thomas Kwiatkowski, and I'm here today I'm not here to celebrate success. I'm here to confront celebrated failure. When we talk about safeguarding in sport, we often look for role models to follow. But today, my own country stands as a warning. Safeguarding is supposed to protect people, not systems. And yet in Canada, we've watched a system once praised for ethics and inclusion collapse under its own ambition, not because of ignorance, but because of choice. I have my reason based on experience, education, and time, and I will share resources in the side to understand, including the outcomes of the long-awaited Commission and Sport report. This is not just Canada's story. It's a story every nation must hear. The Future of Sport in Canada Commission, released earlier this year, revealed what athletes had been saying for decades. Maltreatment was systematic, not occasional. Athletes described years of psychological, physical, emotional abuse, and leadership looked the other way. The Commission uncovered deep conflict of interests, organizations investigating their own failures, administrators protecting reputations instead of athletes. This wasn't a few bad actors. It was a culture, one that protected medals and money, not people. And that culture didn't start at the Olympic level. It started in the community gym, the local rink, the school locker room. Children are told to toughen up. Coaches went unchecked. Complaints disappeared into silence. A concussion? Drive yourself home. An injury? Compete anyways. At the elite level, that silence became institutionalized under the Own the Podium program, a national funding model that rewarded medals over morals. When dollars spent depend on performance, athlete welfare becomes expendable. Safeguarding was treated as a distraction, something that slowed down the quest for gold. That's not a Canadian problem alone. That's a global warning about what happens when winning becomes more important than being human. And while the abuse continued, Canada dismantled the very structures designed to prevent it. The Canadian Olympic Academy, once a hub for education on ethics and leadership, was quietly shut down at the same time Own the Podium was rising in influence, especially around the Vancouver 2010 Winter Olympic Games. Success in 2010 mattered, but something somewhere along the way, gold overtook good. Following a successful time with the NSO, National Sport Organization, Bobsleigh Canada Skeleton during those games, I entered the IOA master's degree program and learned the definition of Olympism in Olympia, Greece. My view returning to Canada showed a different experience. The definition of Olympism in Canada became reduced to one phrase: Own the Podium. And to remove values even further, in 2024, the True Sport Initiative, a national movement built on fairness, respect, and inclusion, was also closed by the Canadian Centre for Ethics in Sport. Imagine that. At the very moment athletes were crying out for help, Canada continued to close its programs for ethics and values. That's not progress. That's moral retreat. Canada protects its images, not its people. It sends that message. But not everyone accepted that silence. One of those voices was a lawyer named Amelia Klein, who was also a former gymnast. She became the face of a national class action lawsuit against Gymnastics Canada and 6 provincial federations. Her work reframed safeguarding as a legal right, not a privilege. She reminded Canada and the world that protecting athletes isn't optional, it's an obligation. When institutions fail, it's often individuals like her who remind us of our collective responsibility. And her message resonates globally. Safeguarding without independence is not safeguarding at all. Here's the truth Canada learned the hard way. You cannot safeguard athletes inside a system built only to win. And even within the system, they don't always win. Yet somehow they felt entitled to export this model to other nations. When the same people chasing medals also control athlete protection, conflicts of interests are guaranteed. When funding is tied to performance, well-being becomes negotiable. When ethics programs are cut, abuse becomes inevitable. Canada didn't fail because it didn't know better. It failed because it chose to look away. So where do we go from here? Safeguarding cannot survive on policy alone. It must live in the values, in the education, and then independence from those who profit from performance alone. Every nation, not just Canada, must ask itself, are we building a system that protects athletes or systems that protect power? Because safeguarding is not charity. It is not compliance. It is the moral foundation of sport itself. If Canada, a nation once seen as an ethical and inclusive place, can lose that foundation, then no country is immune. But that also means every country has a chance to rebuild it, to place people before podiums, and make safeguarding the true measure of success. That is the challenge and the warning we all must take seriously. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike. I mean, I thought it was going to be a presentation, but I really like how you word it. And I also know that, it will get sensitive to get into details, but thanks for highlighting the importance of what we're doing here. Also in the Olympic movement, the spirit of Olympism, where we do need the respect in sport, not medals over morale, and that safeguarding is the moral foundation for sport itself. Okay, due to the interest of time, we may not be able to answer question, but the team will compile the question and also send it out to those who attended today. Yeah. Thank you very much, Mike. Thank you very much, Daniela and Andrea. A really very insightful session that we have today and very impactful. To close the session, I would like to invite our dear IOAPA President, Xavier Jana, to close our session.
Thank you to all speakers for sharing your expertise and your passion for safeguarding in sport. The insight shared today remind us that safeguarding is not one-time action, but a continuous commitment. Together, we are stronger in ensuring that sport reflects the values of respect, inclusion, and fairness. Thanks everyone for taking the time and supporting us in safeguarding. We are counting on you. Formal communication will be shared soon with details of IOAPA next webinars in AI and health in sport. It will be in few weeks, and follow us on social media for the next events. And thank you all.
Thank you very much, Xavier. And today, of course, is just a start. Thanks for listening to our topic today on safeguarding. It is not the end, and I believe everyone has a role to play. So please follow us on social media for our next event. As Xavier said, we will definitely have really great content on AI and health in sport. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening, good night, good morning, good day.